Hello there. Well, as I said in my last video, I was going to do something completely different. And in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I'm fitting my diesel heater into my motorhome. I know that's off the wall, but I've spent a long time visiting different websites, forums, watching videos, tutorials on how to do this. And the moment I would be confident enough to think, yeah, I can do this, I would pick up a screwdriver and I would start to look at things. I would start to look at what I had, and there would be differences that I wasn't expecting, and I was having to go back to the internet to do some more research, and then back to the internet. And in the end, I thought, you know what, I'm gonna make my own video, show you how I do this, what I learn. And I can tell you now, I've learned some things already, and I'm gonna try and give you the information as best I can and try and get it all under one roof. Now, first of all, with regards to locating this diesel heater, there were a couple of options that I antagonized over. Beneath the front passenger seat was one option, but I ruled that out because the space, particularly underneath, is very tight. So I ruled that option out. The next option was beneath here, but I've got a gas locker over there with gas pipes and wires, and I thought, you know what, I don't want to disturb that. So in the end, what I've decided to do is locate it here. Unfortunately, I haven't got a very convenient garage beneath my motorhome, so I've decided to put it here. I need to drill it. I need to obviously do these things, which you'll get to see, but the first thing that I wanted to talk about was fueling, because this has been the biggest headache. I did consider locating a tank there, but in the end I've decided to tap into the main fuel tank. Now you will get to see the footage, because I did, let me just turn this torch on, I did end up taking the fuel sender unit out and doing it correctly as is best, and you will get to see me do that. But I want to say first of all that even though I've done this now, initially when I tapped into this sender unit, I'd done what some people advise, and that is I simply drilled a hole into the top of this nipple. You can't see it too well there, but there's a nipple that is similar to this one over here. You see that nipple there? There is another nipple just here, and it was advised, some people have done it successfully, their diesel units have worked very well for years, and what they done was they simply drilled down. They left everything in situ and they drilled down, starting off with like a 2mm hole, carefully picking out the bits of swarf that they can to prevent as much as possible going into the tank, then going up to 3mm, 4mm, and I ended up with a 5.5mm hole going down, and that meant that my feeder tube could thread down. I removed these two. That feeder tube could thread down straight into the tank. But these nipples, they're hollow, and you've only got about 1, possibly 2mm of plastic at the top of the nipple. So when you thread it down, there isn't much to bite onto. Now, I could pull that. There is resistance, but I've no doubt that I could yank that out. But it did bite down. It did thread it, and it did bite down. But overnight, I had a change of heart, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna take this out, and you'll get to see it. And the reason why I've done that is because A, when you drill, you can drop swarf into the tank. It is possible. And the other thing is, you're blind. If you leave all of this in situ and you simply drill that hole there, you're blind. You don't know exactly where the pipe's going, and if you use a plastic tube, then you know you don't know. You're blind to it. You don't know where it's going, and you've got a little pump in the centre down the bottom here, and the plastic tube, of course, it can bend back on itself over time, giving you that false sort of diesel level. So I decided the following day to remove this diesel sender unit, and that's going to be the next section of this video. You're going to see me remove this. But this is it's a 2004 Ducato based Fiat Ducato based motorhome. Your sender unit, it might look different to this. There are more modern ones that have dedicated feed points on them, and there's more modern ones as well. You need a locking tool to rotate this around, but this is my one, and I'll show you what I've done and how I've done it, and also some mistakes that I made, and I had to take it all apart again. But you'll see that in the next section. Right, the first thing I'm going to do is get into the sender unit, and on the 2004 model Fiat Ducato, you should see it about here. 4 Phillips screws, 1, 2, 3, 4. So first of all, we're going to get those out with these screws removed. This just pops out, and you'll probably be met with this here, which is just soundproofing. That just lifts straight up. You might have to tear a little bit like I did, but that just comes straight out. And then you've got another 4 Phillips screws. There's one just here, 2, 3, and 4. Remove those screws, and then this pops out as well. Now with those screws removed, this here, it just lifts up to reveal the sender unit. And there is my sender unit here. It might look slightly different to your one, but that is what I'm looking at here. Right, I'm giving this, I've got a torch now, I'm giving this just another squirt of, and you can see this I think a little bit better, these bolts. I'm just giving them a proper soaking in WD-40. I've got cardboard beneath we are on our driveway, I've got cardboard beneath the motorhome. I want to give this a proper good soaking. Now I have had a look at these clips. Oh, and you see these plastic lugs just here. I've just tried to take that off, but that is it's a little bit awkward. And there's another one on this side that's just similar. You can just see it there. You can't see it too well. Oh, the head torch. You can just see it on that right side of that plug there. So what I've got is these needle nose pliers to help me. I think if you were to unbolt this and then elevate it, it would be easier. But because I've got these like handy dandy sort of pliers, I'm going to use these, get the tips of those on those lugs there, give it a squeeze and see if they pop out. Yeah, well, the pliers, leaving it in situ, the pliers worked nice. These just pop straight out. And if I can show you the metal lugs there, sorry, the plastic lugs, I just put the pliers on those and pulled it out. Like I say, it would have been easier, particularly on this one, if it was raised just an inch. But the cardboard's beneath the van, beneath the motorhome, and no actual petrol came out of those pipes. I was half expecting it to, but I have got this that was ready for any sort of capture, but the fuel tank is it is empty at the moment. The diesel light is on. I wanted the least amount of fuel in here as possible. But now we're going to take off this electrical connector, and yeah, that electrical connector, that just pulled straight out. That really did. It just pulled straight out. Maybe just push that bit down there on the touch, and then it just comes out. And I'm assuming that there then just unplugs. What I used these here, and I got these in, and I just gave it a little bit of persuasion. You see that? Out it popped. So there's the plug there. Now what I'm doing is I'm just cracking these bolts undone, just loosening them, just sort of a few turns for the time being, because I don't want to get stuck. And they're coming out, they're loosening relatively easily. That one's a little bit awkward, but I haven't taken my seats out. My seats I've left in situ. I think loosened, I believe. So theoretically, I shouldn't get any problems with snapped bolts. But like I say, yeah, undoing these, they can be just a bit fiddly in the fingers, and I'm being careful not to drop one of these nuts when they come out, because they're very small. They're very small, and I guess very easy to drop down the back. Now the other thing is, I'm not sure if I mentioned it, the petrol flap, the petrol cap where I put diesel, sorry, that is undone. That is something I heard, and then I'm putting those somewhere safe in there. Now, I did, believe it or not, clear out all of this area here. If you're doing it, you might want to hoover out this bit, because what you don't want to have happen is to have any shit drop down into the fuel tank. Now when I drilled, there was some, see these tiny bits of swarf here, like plastic shavings. I'm curious to see as to whether or not any of this dropped down into the centre unit. Maybe. I'll get those out of the way there. I think this here just lifts off. It looks like it's just going to come straight up. So this comes up first by the looks of it. I'm going to need two hands. Yeah, it's one of these things. It took two hands. The tolerances between these nuts, it's very tight, so you just lift it sort of evenly, I guess, to get it out, but you'll need two hands for that. But that comes out easy enough. And that reveals that, and I'm assuming that that now will just kind of lift up. But we'll investigate that in a moment. I'll need two hands again. Just when I thought that I was going to need some sort of special tool, I grabbed hold of this here, and literally I just pulled up. It took a bit of oomph, not huge strength, but it certainly took some oomph, and then it just popped up. So now we'll get to see, I hope. Now we need to make sure that there is nothing is going to drop into that tank. I don't want bits of shit dropping in there, and neither should you. I'm going to try and film this as best I can. Lifting this up, you see this rubber gasket here, the sender unit is not going to come out without releasing that rubber gasket. I don't want to get it in the shadow. And the other thing is my pipe, can you see it there? Let's just try and move that just a moment. My feeder pipe that's going down is actually going, it's remaining outside of the sender unit, and it's actually going into the tank. But I'm going to try and jiggery-pokery this out as best I can. There is fuel in it, but you see the gasket's just popped up there. I don't want that to fall down inside. But now, hopefully you'll be able to see the pipe has gone down from that hole. It's gone straight down, and it's gone, I guess, that little gap between the gasket, the gasket, the sender unit, and straight into the tank. So I can only assume that has gone down straight into the bottom of the tank. Well, unfortunately, I couldn't film it, but Right, I've got to interrupt the video here because I didn't know it at the time, but this is the moment that I messed up. If you're doing this, if you're extracting your diesel sender unit, as you pull it out, you need to pay attention to where the float comes out, the front or the back. So pick an aspect on top of the sender unit and see whether that float is to one side or the other side, because as you're taking it out, that float, and it's very handy, it can pass underneath the actual sender unit, which makes it handy as you pull it out. So when you do it, make sure you pay attention as to where it goes, because I learnt the hard way. When I went to put my diesel sender unit back in, I tucked it under the bottom side as I put it back in the diesel tank. But then I know now that the sender unit, the float, it popped up the wrong side. It went all the way under and popped up the wrong side. Now the problem with that is, if it pops up the wrong side, your petrol gauge, your diesel gauge will still indicate, but it will only indicate up to a quarter of a tank. So it goes up the wrong side, that float goes up the wrong side, but it only goes so far. So don't get caught out on that, because if you put that diesel sender unit back and the float pops up the wrong side, it will be a whole load of pain. I had to, it's what I done, and I had to, once I put everything back together again, I had to take it all apart again to correct that. So watch out for that. Film it, but this sender unit, it did come out. It took me about maybe 15 seconds of jiggery pokery to get that float out. But yeah, it lifted out. It lifted out with without any issues. See, I did think that this sender unit from that hole there would go down inside there. Certainly when people drill their holes here, and I know many people do, it drops straight down into the sender unit. But then you need to avoid this pump here, you see. Now I have seen someone with a different sender unit, and what he done was he basically drilled a hole. He took his sender unit out, or at least he lifted it, and his pipe was coming down. And then what he done was he as his pipe was coming down the middle here, he bent his pipe out, and then he tucked it down the side here. Have a look inside. I'm not sure if this is going to come out. I'm going to have to turn my torch on. Can you see the bottom of the tank? There's actually a recess that goes down. Can you see in there? So it does sit, the sender unit, when it's sat on the bottom, it sits in that kind of recess bit there. You see just the circle just there. It sits down there. So when I'm looking, right, this is something I'm learning. I'm learning as I'm going. You see, I've just pulled that pipe out just a little bit. And the rubber gasket that you did see around here, of course, it doesn't go there. It comes all the way up around here. So that arm, it's just fallen back down. But you get the idea. That arm is free. The pipe is free. However, as I mentioned to my brother a little while ago, I'm not sure. See this spring here? And this does actually compress down. All right? Now, that, if you look at the pipe here, maybe when you fit it, you see the pipe is almost touching the bottom, and considering that sits in that little indentation, so it could be that this pipe is actually too long, because if that does, when it goes in, if that does compress down, I'll be in danger of drinking too much fuel. My heater could use all the fuel. When I go to start the motorhome, it might be, if it's been on for a day or two, it might be starved of fuel. So if anything, my fear was this was too short. Now I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, no, this is actually too long. It could do with another inch off it. But let's take this out, in fact, and I'll show you exactly. But you see, it is unthreading, but I don't want you to pay too much attention to that, because it really is only on about 1 millimetre of plastic. But I need to find out, first of all, if that does compress down when it goes in, because if it is, this is going to be too long. Okay then, so you see the fuel line is connected. The low diesel warning light is on, and what I'm doing is I'm just blowing into this end of the pipe, and Can you hear that? So I know that despite the low diesel warning light being on, that pipe is still making contact with diesel. So that's another way I know that this pipe here is too long. More needs to come off. So my tube is now 20 centimeters from the top there. That is the measurement on mine. 25 was too long. See, so now we've got the same thing. We've got it connected up. I'm going to blow in the tube here, and I don't want to hear bubbles. And I know it's not because I've already tried it. But that's better. 20 centimeters from end to end. I do. And I'm looking inside. I've given it a good inspection already. Half expecting to see swarf. Maybe I'll pour that petrol out into a jug and see what was captured in there. And there's your answer. I can see just one tiny bit. I don't know if you can see that, or maybe a couple of tiny bits that managed to find their way in. But I actually thought there would be more than that. But you don't want one of those bits going into one of your injectors, I guess. I don't know if that's possible, but that is what we've got. Yeah, you see, after some jiggery pokery, I've managed to get this back in. It was fine. I needed two hands. I couldn't film it, of course, but it was fine. There was this fear of extracting this sender unit all the way out and trying to get it back in. It would be a struggle, but it was fine. No problems. Just a minute, maybe a minute of guiding, not even that, and getting it back in. So that wasn't a worry. Now, I just had this out again, believe it or not, because this here, I forgot there's a nut that needs to go on the back to secure it. But where this particular hole is drilled, the underside of this here, you can't actually get a nut on it because there's no thread. There's no way of getting a nut on it. Now, someone did say only yesterday on that forum that yeah, he just drills, I think it's a 4mm hole, and he puts the nylon tube in straight through. It's a snug fit. There's no pressure. He doesn't even seal it. I think he just plastic tie wraps it into one of these holes, and that's it. He calls it good. I'm still undecided as to whether or not I'm gonna just put a bit of silicone or something there, just to give that a bit of something. Now it's simply a case of reversing what we've already done, and again I'm gonna need two hands. But that's back in position. You see, it just pushes down just a bit. So I'm going to push that down. The gasket looks like it's seated correctly. I'm looking all the way around, and that looks like a snug fit. And then it's a case of putting that plate over the top and then bolting down. But I'll need two hands. But we're going to put that plate on now. Right, this here was the first kind of little bit of a problem I had, and that is getting this seated back down. You've got the gasket beneath there, and this it's just a little bit proud, and I'm just going to tease that down there. You've got to really sort of push it down, but I think it needs to go down just a little bit more. Now I've got this here. I think that over the top there we might have some screw holes visible now. I'm going to try and get that in. There we go. But I'm going to need two hands again because this is, there we go, we're popping all the way in now. But I'm going to need two hands to get this in. Then we'll start tightening the nuts, and hopefully that'll pinch it down nicely. Yeah, and again this here, trying to get these nuts lining up with this plate, this metal plate. The tolerances are very fine. It just took a little bit of jiggery pokery, maybe a couple of minutes. You can't tip it down sort of one side because then you haven't got the tolerance at the other end. You've got to kind of just rotate it around and get them as close as you can, and then try and push it down as equally as you can. And on kind of rusted bolts, it's not the easiest thing. This is probably the most difficult thing I've done is getting that you know, pushed and seated nicely down, and then getting that on. The rest of it has been a piece of cake. Right, got the nut, and now it's a case of doing these back up. I'm going to rotate around. Yeah, these fuel lines, you can't see that too well. They do just push straight in. Oh, there's a bit of an angle there. You see the little lug on the side nearest me, just there. Push those in, and getting them back in, it is just a case of push fit. There you go, it's going nowhere. Right, the next thing I'm going to talk about is the fitting of the fuel line. Now, there's a video that I have seen on YouTube. It's an Australian guy, an intelligent guy, and I think this fuel hose, fuel line is his sort of, and fueling is his area of expertise. So I'm going to talk to you about this, and what he's saying is the fuel pumps that we use, they are better at blowing than they are at sucking. These are the type of diesel pumps that you'll get, and because of that, he said you need the distance between the fuel source and the diesel pump to be as short as possible, and then the remainder of the transit needs to be pushing. Now, my diesel heater is right at the back of the motorhome, but the distance between here and the fuel pump, that needs to be as short as possible. And the fuel hose that he says you can use for that, he says, is not so important for that sucking part. So I'm going to go for this type of fuel hose here. Now, this has got a 4mm internal diameter. I'm going to fit that. In fact, I've fitted it already. You can see it there. I'm going to fit that from the fuel tap, from the fuel feed, diesel feed, all the way to the fuel filter, and then onto the fuel pump. But after the fuel pump, he says it's important to use this much narrower. This has got a 2mm internal diameter, a 4mm outside diameter, and you hear it's very hard. It's like a nylon. Throw away the stuff you get when you first buy your diesel heaters, because it's normally soft. He says that this is important, that you have this hard sort of tube with the narrow diameter, internal diameter. Now, the reason why he says this is because these here, they are small, and they're not that efficient at passing, at pushing, at blowing fuel with such a large diameter as that. Again, this is 4mm internal diameter. He says that the weight of fuel that will pass through that line is just too much. It's too much, and it's not that efficient for fuel pumps. And air can get in this system, especially as you're routing the fuel hose back to your diesel heater. Air can get in the system, and particularly when you have elevations, that air pocket, it seems to want to rise, and gravity is working against the fuel pump. The fuel pump's trying to push fuel, but because of this larger diameter, 4mm, it's struggling. And this is a reason why you have air in the system. Some diesel heaters, they work better than others, even the same make. And what he's saying is, to get those lower ambient temperatures where your diesel heater is just ticking over just lightly to maintain an ambient temperature, some diesel heaters, they will only do so much before they conk out. And that's why I think some diesel heaters can go lower than others when it comes to maintaining that ambient temperature. And he says it's possibly air that's got in the system. The diesel pump is being told it only needs to work lightly, gently, but it's got air in the system, and it's battling that gravity as those air pockets are staying in the system. So from the fuel pump to the diesel heater, it's important you use this tough stuff that doesn't absorb the pulsing fuel pump, because when the fuel pump works, it pulses like that. It sends out a puff of air, it blows it through, and in the smaller diameter, I know it sounds counterintuitive, but it pushes the diesel much better. And he gave a demonstration, and you saw a bit of fuel line that he had that absorbed that sort of shock, that takes the energy out of that pulse, and with a larger internal diameter. And he connected it to a fuel pump, and you saw it just at the end, it was just weeping out. And then he disconnected this thicker fuel pump and he connected this, and he had it upright, and you saw it was spurting out. So even though it's that smaller diameter, it's important that this goes in from the diesel pump to the diesel heater to use this type of hose. But like I say, from this actual fuel feed, I'm going with this because this is heat resistant, it's frost resistant, and it's tougher. And he said it's not so important to have it from here, so long as after the diesel pump I go down to this stuff. Now the other thing that he said, and I'm going to need 2 hands for this, so I'm just going to try and balance this here. In fact, if I can, without knocking that over, can I balance that there? Yeah. The next thing I want to talk to you about is connections, and it's something that he mentioned. Now, when connecting our hoses to things like our fuel pumps or our fuel filters, it's if this is a 4mm outer diameter, you would think that you need a 4mm internal diameter to fit in there, and you see it goes in nicely, and that is an assumption that I made. But he said that this is actually incorrect. 4mm outer diameter, 4mm internal diameter, pushing that, they go in nicely, but again that creates air. So when doing the connection, because this will not fit on there, it just won't do it. You need one of these connectors. So when you're doing it, you need to go down a size. This is a 3mm internal diameter, and this is a 4mm external diameter. You would think there would be an assumption that they wouldn't fit, but in actual fact they do. It's very tight, and it may be that you have to drop this in like some hot water to soften it up, but you see that it's tight, and it goes, you can feed it all the way in. Now he said that when you do this, when you make a connection to anything, a fuel filter or whatever it is you're doing, it's important that there is no air gap in this section here. You see, I've just touched that in. There is going to be an air gap here. You need to make sure that this fuel line goes all the way into the center there. Excuse me while the dustbin come, I might have to hit the pause button. Yeah, sorry, that was the bin men going past. Yeah, you need this hose here to be inserted into that and go all the way through to meet the nozzle of, in this case, the fuel filter. Because if I was just to put that in here like that, just a millimetre or two, it would be the same thing. There would be air in this stretch here, and again, you don't want air in the system. You want the diesel heaters to work at those lower temperatures, and it's less work for the diesel pump to do. If you've got all that solid fuel here, it just transits the fuel much easier. So when you do it, you really need to push in and make sure that hose, in my right hand, this hand here, it goes all the way through until it touches the nozzle here, so that there's no gap. And another thing is the diesel C-clamps, these hose clips. These are the ones that you often get with the kit, and there's several bits that you need to ditch and throw away. They're no good. You see, this is a Jubilee clip, but the problem with this type of Jubilee clip is the flat spot here. When you tighten this here is fine, but you'll always get a flat spot here. These are the diesel clips that you need to use. When you tighten them up, that bit in the middle there, it goes round and it gets hold of the, whether it's the exhaust or fuel, it gets hold of it much better. And when you're talking about exhausts or fuel systems, you don't want obviously leaks. So that goes on there like that, and it gets tightened up. But I thought that was worthy of an explanation. Now, with regards to routing the fuel line, you see it's going off in that direction. I tried to get the fuel line to go straight out the back, but I could not, for love nor money, I could not get it to go straight out that way, and I couldn't get it to come this way. Plenty of room there at the front to drop it down the front and then go on the underside, but in the end I've decided to go that way, out the back and to the side there. Now the exhaust is that side, but we'll get under the vehicle now and I'll show you how I've routed it. Now things are a bit tight here. There's the back of the engine bay there. You've got the front wheel here just under me, but it's very difficult to film this. Now there is my diesel heater fuel line coming through there. You see I've wrapped it in that insulation, heat resistant. Now it is quite a way above the exhaust, I guess. Let's see if I can get another angle here. You can see there may be sort of 7 or 8 inches above, and it is that heat resistant fuel line that I've used. But hopefully, and then I've fixed it there, and then it comes down. Now there's the first fuel filter that I've used there. I have got a better fuel filter. I know some people, they argue you don't need, if you're coming from the diesel tank, you don't need a filter at all. But many people, they're adamant it's better to use one. Now I have got another fuel filter. You'll see it in a minute. But I couldn't fit it there, even though it's a better fuel filter. It has to have a certain orientation, a certain rotation, and the mounting bracket makes it very tricky. If I was fitting over on that side of the vehicle, it would have been much easier, but this side it proved a little tricky. Now the fuel pump fitted at 45 degrees, you can see that here, and it is as close to the engine, as close to the fuel source as I could get. You see I'm using the heat resistant line all the way to the fuel pump, but that, for me, that was as close as I could get to the fuel source. And after the fuel source, we've got the nylon line, the thin nylon line. But because we are close to the exhaust, let's see if I can get an angle for you there. You see I've used that heat resistant shroud as well to go around the pipes. I'll include a photograph of this shroud in there, but better to be safe than sorry. And then as it comes out, it comes all the way under here. Now these here, and I've used it just for that corner there as well, these here, that's not a join there, that is, you know, I showed you some pipe that had 4 mil internal diameter. This line, this fuel line, it can vibrate, so I've used this in little sections just as mounting points. So that's not an actual join in the fuel line there. It's just a mounting point. I've made use of that 4 mil line, and that is another stretch of 4 mil line there. But there's nylon line going inside it because it's above the exhaust. Just as the exhaust exits here, I ran out of that shroud, so I thought, well, I'll put that heat resistant fuel line on. But there is the nylon line is running to it, but there's the exhaust. But that's sort of probably 10 inches above. That might be a bit of overkill to use that black line. It's way above it, but I had it, so rather than throw it away, I thought I'd make use of it. And then we go further back, and then the fuel line, it continues, you can't see it too well, continues to come all the way down the back here. And I actually ran out of nylon fuel line here. So I had to make a join, and considering I had this fuel filter, I know some people you don't need to use one fuel filter. Well, I've ended up using 2 because I had to put a join in anyway. I thought, well, right or wrong, I don't know. I thought, because I've got to make a join, rather than make a join just connecting 2 bits of nylon pipe together, I thought, you know what, I'll just put this diesel heater here. It's in the right orientation. It's facing the right direction, and the mounting bracket it worked for me. So I thought I'd fit that here. you see on here, it's just got some spot welds here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put sealant all the way around, sealing that to make sure no fumes come from the inside, like that, all the way around. Like this here, it goes together pretty easy. It's self-explanatory. I'm sure you've seen the videos with regards to this. It's a bit tricky. A spanner would be handy, a ratchet spanner would be handy to get those down. I'll attach the fuel lines later. But next, we've got this here. Now, this here, I'm nervous, I have to say. I have checked underneath, I've checked for gas pipes, wires, etc. That's the nerve-wracking thing about it. But you can only do so much. If you've got a camper van, for instance, self-build, somebody else has built it, you don't know where the wires are going to be running. You'd like to think they're around the edge, but this is what I'm going to do. I've marked it, I've checked as best I can. There's nothing running over here, so I'm hoping I'm going to be lucky. Now I'm using a 130mm drill bit. That is what got recommended. I think 128mm got recommended as well. This here, when you tighten it down, it goes anti-clockwise. But we'll drill this and we'll see what we get. Right, I've gone pretty much as far as I can go with this. I might have to go from the underside and now hit up to get that last bit. Right, well, that went okay. I mean, look at that. That is a fair old thickness there, a couple of inches that it had to go through. I had to go from the top and from the bottom, but that was okay. Maybe an electric drill would be better. Sorry, a power drill as opposed to a cordless. But look at the thickness of that. Right, a slight change of plan. I'm actually going to pick up some heat resistant paint today and I'm going to paint it around here and also across this insulation here. Getting sealant all around that rim there is not the easiest thing to do. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to paint that. Plus, of course, I'm going to use the sealant as a gasket and maybe around there as well. We'll see how it goes. But I wanted some protection on there, that wooden base and the insulation. Now, the power cable is here ready. I have had to extend all of the leads, and there's I think 3 leads that all need extending simply because of my circumstances. Everything is all the way down here, and I run the leads above the bottom of the vehicle, just beneath these chairs here, all the way around there. There was a convenient hole already in the bottom of this cupboard, which I used to put the power leads to the battery, and the battery is just underneath here. Now, when you extend power leads, I've gone up to 10 AWG, 10 gauge wire, and if you need to extend power leads, you need to extend from the power source first. So the thicker wire from the power source, in my case a battery, going all the way back, and because I had a decent length of it, I had the decent wire, the thicker wire, all the way back to about here. And this is the original wire that's here, and there's a fuse. The fuse is here, so it's fused. But this wire here is not great. But if you're doing power wires, extending them, don't extend from here and then have the thinner wire at your power source, at your battery. Now, some people, to get power, they tap into their fuse board. But I looked into it and I was told the battery is better. I've got a leisure battery here, and that's what I'm going to be tapping into. With regards to the fuel pump and also the control panel that's here, again, I had to extend the wires, so that's already been done. To extend wires, I solder. That's what I do. You can crimp, you can solder, but I chose to solder. There are many videos on the internet that you can find out how to solder or crimp wires, but that's what I've done. I went for the high temperature paint, which I've got this side, the sides of the hole covering that insulation, and the underside as well, just to protect from heat from the turret plate. Nice big layer of sealant going around there, acting as a gasket, so no fumes get through. But I've just put that down nice and thick. Now I'm going to pinch the turret down. Sealant under there, and there it is. It's all fitted. It's all fitted. There's the fuel line coming in. Seat under there. I've spray painted underneath here as well. I'm trying to keep that, peg that fuel line back as far away from this heat exhaust as I can. Again, this is the second time. What I found works for me is just hit the
stop heating,
turn it off, rather than
thanks for using. I wish you a safe
rather than
journey.
hold this button here. Don't mess about with that, because whenever I do that, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't prime. But if I just hit the power button,
Start heating.
you might be able to hear the fan going. And then with a few minutes, a minute or so, you'll hear the ticking of the fuel pump kicking in. And I've been watching the fuel transit through the fuel lines. This is the second time I've had to do it, but it's over 20 feet probably of fuel line, and it's very nearly at that second filter that I've got. So I'm just gonna do it again, and as long as I get that second filter filled, then I know that the fuel is going to be very close to the diesel heater. I don't know if you can hear that. It's the fan just going up, but it is actually ticking. You can't hear it, but this is another reason I didn't want to put the pump inside. I didn't want to put the pump inside the cab. You know, when you fit the... There's a car going past. When you fit a pump, they say keep the pump above the fuel source. It's much better to do it that way. In case there is a leak, you won't empty your fuel tank. But I was hard pushed, and I wanted to keep that noise far away from the from where we sit normally. But there you go. I think this go will do it. Can you see that? Again, I've checked the entire line. I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear me, but I've checked the entire line, and there is literally no bubbles that I'm seeing getting pushed along. Literally zero. Let's focus on that if I can. Very, very happy. Yeah, that's it. We've got heat. We've got heat. It's literally just started to come through. I need to drill a hole in here, but rather than use a jigsaw, so I've just opened that for now. But that needs fitting. But everything else is done. But yeah, we have got heat. It took about 4 startups before it primed and started throwing out heat, but that's a long way for it to go. But very happy, and overall I think the actual fitting of it, I'm glad I started filming, because there's so much that I learned. I'm hoping that I've passed some on to you. You know, there's so much information out there, but yeah, I think that is well worth it. I'm very happy. I think this is going to be a long video. Now, I'm not a professional, I'm not an expert. I would never profess to be an expert at anything. The chances of me being able to answer your questions are pretty much 0 to none. You know, I'm not an expert. If you want to take this on, if you want to fit your own diesel heater, then that is on you, but you need to do your own research. But if I can do it, anyone can do it. Best of luck.